Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another lecture on operations planning and scheduling. Today we are going to start module 2, that is manufacturing planning. And this module is further divided into 4 parts. In the first part, we will be discussing the topic of developing. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to understand the importance of sales and operations planning as a best practice to develop a production plan to avoid imbalance between supply and demand. You should be able to differentiate among 5 levels of a manufacturing planning and control system. You should be able to understand the difference between sales and operations planning for a make to stock and a make to order production environment. And finally, you should be able to develop the production plan using the 2 strategies, level and chase strategy. So we will be discussing level strategy for a make to stock production environment and a chase strategy for a make to order production environment. And we will be making calculations using Excel. So there are 4 levels of strategy. At the top level, there is corporate strategy that actually helps us to devise strategies for different business units within the same corporation. Each business has different functions, so each function has its own strategy. And then the operating strategies are developed based on the functional strategies. The important point here to keep in mind is that production strategy is an example of function area strategy. Production or manufacturing strategy is an example of production area, of a function area strategy. So we will be discussing 2 strategies under production or manufacturing strategy discussion, level strategy and chase strategy. So S&OP is a key manufacturing planning and control process where executive level management meets on a monthly basis and reviews projections for demand and supply and the resulting financial impact. S&OP is a decision-making process that makes certain that tactical plans in every area of the business are in alignment with the overall view of the company's business. So you have demand on one side and supply on the other. So sources of demand could be confirmed orders from the customers, or they could be demand forecasts. The sources of supply could be inventory from the previous periods, especially if we are talking about the finished goods inventory. They could be supply orders for the components and raw materials. And of course, the source of supply are your resources and capacity as well, the equipment and machinery. Now, the ultimate goal of sales and operations planning is to balance demand and supply, and it is quite tricky. And this can be done only through a systematic process, and that is a series of executive level meetings that are done on a monthly basis. So that reviews the past performance and makes decisions for the future periods. So sales and operations planning is based on the interaction of 4 fundamental concepts: demand, supply, volume, and mix. The main decision in S&OP process is made regarding the volume of different products within a product family that have to be produced during future periods, typically during next month. And then that volume is broken down into mix of different specific individual products within that family. So we will further explain this concept in the following slides. So when demand exceeds supply, there could be different consequences of that. One of them is that customer service suffers because manufacturing cannot provide the volume of products required by the customer because demand is greater than the supply. Costs increase because of the overtime and premium freight rates. So you have to go for the overtime in order to meet for the difference between demand and supply, or you should be looking for the means to quickly uh, transport the product to the customer. So that will ultimately increase the cost. Quality suffers because of the rush to ship products. So these are different consequences that can result when demand exceeds supply. When the opposite happens, when supply exceeds demand, inventories increase because of the imbalance between demand and manufacturing capacity. So you have to incur the inventory carrying cost. There is also a threat of obsolescence of the inventory. So that is a big risk because your cash is tied up with the inventory. So layoffs may result from the production rate cuts, causing plant efficiency and morale to decline. So you may be laying off some of your workforce in order to sort of reduce the capacity to match the demand. Profit margins are squeezed because of price cuts and discounting. So you have to make sure somehow you are able to sell the product. So you might have to offer price cuts or discounts or uh, some some sort of promotions in order to let the inventory leave your organization so that your cash doesn't tie up for a longer period of time. So therefore, the key to good business performance is to maintain a proper balance between demand and supply. And this cannot be done unless this activity is performed in collaboration of all the departments that are involved. If demand planning is done separately and supply planning is done separately, then there will always be some imbalance between demand and supply. Volume concerns the big picture decisions about how much to make and the production rates of product families. Mix concern detailed decisions about which individual products to make, in what sequence, and for which customer orders. Smart companies carefully plan their volumes first and then focus on mix decisions. So this is a sequential process. This is done because if volumes are planned effectively, mixed decisions become much easier to cope with. Imbalances in demand and supply occur frequently over the course of a year, and as a result, volume decisions need to be reviewed and adjusted on a monthly basis. And that is actually the core of sales and operations planning process. And these are the steps of S&OP process. As I mentioned that this is a systematic process. So generally this activity is performed at the end of the month. So the performance from the previous month is reviewed. Performance here means the sales reports and the production reports, they are analyzed. And based on this analysis, the demand planning is done for the next month based on this analysis as well as the demand and forecast for the future. So we might be using here some statistical methods of forecasting and some qualitative methods as well as we have discussed in the previous module. So you could see the qualitative methods like management forecast could also come into play. So in light of the demand planning, and the result is some sort of spreadsheet. And we go for the supply planning. And based on these two plannings, the demand planning and supply planning, there is a pre-S&OP meeting in which it is analyzed whether the current capacity can meet the demand or not. What are the trade-offs that could be made and so on. Different discussions are done here. Ideally, if the supply is enough to meet the demand, the final decision is made, but that is generally not the case. There are some conflicts that have to be resolved. There could be some financial impacts that have to be considered as well. So some initial decisions are made, some tentative plan is agreed upon here, and that is forward to the final executive S&OP meeting where any conflicts that couldn't be resolved in the pre-S&OP meeting are resolved, and budgets are approved if required, and the resources are approved if required, and final plan for the next month, for example, is approved here. So the most important point here is that this is a systematic process, and it is recommended to follow the details that are recommended in each of these 5 steps in order to make this process robust and to reach uh, the decisions that are realistic. Now, S&OP differs for different manufacturing environments, as we have discussed in the first module, that the manufacturing lead time is different for different production environments. So engineer to order uh, S&OP process focuses on product specifications for specific customer order, engineering capacity needed, and project schedule. Make to order focuses on demand forecast for the product families, design or material specifications. So this is for make to order. So make to order focuses on demand forecast for the product families and design or material specifications that are required for that specific order. Then assemble to order also requires demand forecast and accurate configuration options. And make to stock focuses on demand forecast for the product families. Now we will be focusing on these two production environments, and we will see more specifically that in make to stock production environments, one of the key decisions to be made is the level of finished goods inventory. And for make to order, one of the key decision and one of the key parameters actually to look for is the amount of backlog that the organization is carrying. So we will discuss it in detail in the next 2 segments. So these are the 5 levels of production planning and control system. First, there is a strategic business plan that spans for a few years. Then there is a production plan, master production schedule, material requirements plan, and production activity control. The time horizon is the largest for strategic business plan. It spans few years. Production plan is generally made for the next year, and then this is reviewed on quarterly or monthly basis. MPS is the production plan for the individual products. This was for product families. This is for individual products for the next month or quarter. And that is actually dependent upon the production plan. And this MPS is reviewed generally on a weekly basis. Then we have material requirements plan for next month or so. And this is reviewed on maybe daily to weekly basis. Then production activity control is the execution of the plans, and this is reviewed on typically daily basis. So our focus in this lecture is on a production plan. And we will be focusing on 2 strategies of developing a production plan, the level strategy and chase strategy. So as a conclusion, what we decide in a production plan, the quantities of each product group that must be produced in each period, the desired inventory levels, so that is a important decision, the sources of equipment, labor, and material needed in each period, and the availability of the resources needed. So level of detail is not that high as in the strategic business plan. The production plan will show major product groups or families, and the planning horizon is usually 6 to 18 months and is reviewed perhaps each month or quarter. And once again, I repeat that the process to develop this production plan and to review this production plan on monthly basis is called sales and operations planning. Thank you.